Hello and welcome everyone to week 4 of the Squirtle Pay Dirt Pick'em Show, sponsored by Maples, Nix, and Diesel Horse Law Firm. We're joined today, as always, by Tom Nelson and Mark Rogers, who will be calling our games of the week on the Squirtle Network this Friday. Actually, Tom, you have the week off, so it'll be Todd Miller and Adam Dieselhorst calling Garber versus Cummington Douglas, and Mark Rogers and Coach Sean Meek will have the Pauls Valley Marlowe game. We have a special guest on the show tonight, Bryce Lamer, a graduate of Garber High School. Bryce won football and basketball state championships during his time as a Wolverine. And another connection to our Squirrel Games of the Week, Bryce's wife is from Marlowe, so he has big-time connections to both of these games we'll just be discussing tonight on the show. We were supposed to have the great Monty Holland on as a guest tonight, but Monty couldn't make it the last minute, so we have Adam Dieselhorst, the boss man, filling in for Monty. Great to have Adam on the show. Obviously a graduate of Fairview High School, and you hear his voice on the Squirrel Games of the Week every week. Our final guest, as always, the line setting and score predicting lawyer, Jacob Dieselhorst, one of the partners at Maples, Nix, and Dieselhorst Law Firm. Guys, thanks for being on the show tonight. Let's go ahead and jump into our Pay Dirt Pick'em games. Pick'em game number 1, Luther 1-2 on the season under new head coach Brad Robertson. And the Lions have another tough test as they travel to Edmond to take on the Crossings Christian Knights. The Knights are now 3-0 on the season after a 26-20 defeat of Cassidy last week. Mark, you called that Crossings game a week ago. Tell us what to watch for in this matchup.
Well, I think Crossings is pretty good. They're experienced in the offensive line. They have got a lot of good athletes on the team, and their offense is really tough to defend. Luther 1-2 this year. Their only win is over Perry. I think Crossings is going to win this game. That district is really tough. Star Spencer's off to a good start this season. You've got Jones in there that I think is going to be the eventual district champion. But there's some other really good teams in here. So I think Crossings gets off to a good start in the district, and the Knights take out the Lions.
Tom Nelson.
Luther is 1-2, but that does include losses to a couple of undefeated teams and a convincing win over Perry, who really didn't look too bad when I saw them a couple of weeks ago and they lost to Tonkawa 8-0. The coaches picked Crossings and Luther 3rd and 4th in the preseason 2A2 rankings. Crossing 3-0. Got a nice win at Cassidy last week, as Mark said. Luke Olson had 124 yards rushing, caught a couple of passes, and scored a couple of touchdowns. Last year, this ball game was all Luther. 27-0 was the final. And I think that Crossings is remembering that this week, and they want to get a little bit of payback. I think they'll get a little payback. So I think Crossings will win.
Adam, you called that game with Mark, Crossings at Cassidy a week ago. Tell us what to watch for with this Crossings Knights team.
Yeah, just to kind of reiterate what Mark said, Crossings does a lot of things that are kind of not normal in the current game as far as how they run offense. It's really interesting. They're very multiple, more of a power run game. They don't really spread it out a whole lot. But and defensively, they do things a lot differently too. But it's no different with their leader, Jeremy Cleaver, on the defensive side. They're very aggressive, do a great job. Tom mentioned Luther has kind of had the upper hand in this game recently. These two teams are very evenly matched. I'm going to give the upper hand to Crossings on this one, so I'll go with Crossings.
Bryce Lamer.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a game that I don't know a lot about, I think you got to go with the expert opinion here. And Crossings 3-0. I think they make it 4-0 with the win over Luther.
Jacob Dieselhorst.
Crossings has one of the biggest home field advantage of any team in Oklahoma small school football. Just an electric atmosphere there for all Friday night games. And Luther has always seemed to give Crossings trouble. Just their style of play. I do expect this to be a much better game than maybe it looks on paper. I have Crossings a 10-point favorite, and I do have Crossings winning the game 27-20.
By the way, Luther had the best upgrade since the Clampets from their old field to the new field. Coach Meek can probably talk about that a little bit, but their old facility right by the old Highway 66, I think they were it was a co-op with the agricultural department. They were growing corn out there and all kinds of things, and now they got a palace with turf. So congratulations to Luther and their huge upgrade.
And Mark, what's the chicken place that's down the road for any of the fans? Well, I guess they're not going that way.
It's called, isn't it called the Chicken Shack? Yeah.
It might be. It's not a real original
Shack
name, but I hear the chicken's good.
The Chicken Shack and the Lumber Shack. That's in Hera, but both places are pretty good.
Okay.
All right, entire panel taking the Crossings Knights. Let's go to game number 2. We'll go to Class 5A. The El Reno Indians 1-2 on the season, but had an off week last week to prepare for the undefeated Elgin Owls, who have been very impressive this season with big wins over Anadarko, Cache, and Weatherford. Tom Nelson gives a preview.
It's district opener week, and in 5A1, that's the situation here. Elgin is the only team in that district to enter district play undefeated 3-0. El Reno, as you said, is 1-2. The Owls have been impressive. Beat Anadarko 72-0, Cache 55-6, and Weatherford 42-7. I'm going to play the comparative score angle on this one a little bit. Weatherford has played them both the last 2 weeks. Weatherford beat El Reno at El Reno 28-26, and then last week lost to Elgin in Weatherford 42-7. I'll also throw in the Elgin won this one a year ago 47-8. I feel pretty confident picking the Owls big in this one.
Mark Rogers.
I'm really impressed with what Chalmer Wyatt's done at Elgin. They moved up in classification. They were 2A in, I think, 2000, 2001. They were in 2A. Now they're in 5A. I think they would be a state championship contender or maybe a favorite or co-favorite with Wagner if they were in Class 4A. I think they're going to be the district champion this year. They lost to Midwest City last year, the final week of the season, to finish runner-up. So this is a team that's got really good participation. They've got good players across the board. So I think that Elgin wins the game. I think El Reno's a lot better. I don't know that it'll be a blowout, but I think Lawton Mac has got a much better team this year. Midwest City's kind of down a little bit. So I think this district comes down to Elgin and Lawton Mac, and the Owls may win it. I think everybody's playing for second behind Carl Albert in 5A, but this has been a really good year for Elgin.
Adam DeSource.
Yeah, Elgin's a team that we've heard you experts talk about quite a bit when we had our preseason show. As a team I believe Tom Nelson may have mentioned as somebody to look out for, and they have definitely not disappointed. On my end here, I'm kind of pulling my heartstrings a little bit. El Reno is obviously a Squirtle Network school, so I'm always pulling for our Squirtle partner schools and Coach Hayden and that crew over there. But I just think ultimately I think Elgin's going to be too much in this one, so I'm going to go with Elgin.
Bryce.
Yeah, I mean, El Reno kind of pulls at my heartstrings as well because I have a practice in UConn and see a lot of patients from that area. So I don't want to go against the home team, but ultimately I think Elgin's just too powerful. They're 3-0. I think they stay undefeated and get the win this week.
Jacob DeSource.
Yeah, Elgin has outscored their 3 opponents 173-13. I mean, that's just very impressive, especially considering that they have moved up in class, from 3A to 5A just in the last few years. But this is a tough game for them going on the road. El Reno is a team that, is going to protect their home field. They're going to show up. They're going to play hard-nosed football. They're going to, have some home field advantage. They're going to have a little bit of a chip on the shoulder after losing, some tough games. But I have Elgin a 14-point favorite, and I think Elgin's going to win the game 42-28.
Entire panel taking Crossings, entire panel taking Elgin. By the way, before we get into our third game, Mark has been requesting that we tally up the expert pick'em standings for so far in the season. I took some time recently to do that, and I'll send Mark a bill for my time in that. But here's our season standings so far.
That's not $300 an hour work, by the way.
It might be maybe $250.
$2.50
so far. Mark Rogers 21-3. Tom Nelson 18-3. Remember, Tom doesn't pick the games that he calls, so he has 3 fewer games than Mark. And Jacob Diesehorst 19-5 so far. So close season standings for our experts. Our best guest picker so far, I hate to admit this, Michael Swisher had a perfect 8-0 week last week. So he
just copied though off of everyone else.
That's no pressure, Bryce. No
Tom
pressure.
and I were undefeated last week too.
Very
Hey,
true.
Mark.
So,
Hey, Mark, real quick before we go to the next game, have you been to the Pizza Corral in Elgin ever before?
I went to a pizza place in Fletcher one time, which is a suburb of Elgin. And then there's definitely a pizza place in Marlow that's supposed to be pretty good. But I have not been to the Pizza Corral in Elgin. And the Pizza Corral doesn't sound – listen, they got to be better at pizza than naming their restaurant, because the Pizza Corral does not sound like something that I would want to stop in and to eat.
It has been a few years since I've been down Elgin Way, but at one point, and I don't think it's there anymore, they had a Taco Tico, one of the few Taco Ticos in Oklahoma, but it's not there anymore, I don't think. So
I think there is a Taco Tico in Duncan. which that could be the pregame meal Friday night.
There you go.
Pick'em game number 3. The Noble Bears have had a tough non-district schedule playing Piedmont, Blanchard, and Tuttle. The Bears travel to Ardmore on Friday to take on the 0-3 Tigers. Tom Nelson, one of these teams will be 1-0 in District 5A1 this week. Who is it?
Well, Noble's 0-3, but they have played some good teams. Piedmont, Blanchard, and Tuttle are combined 8-2, but Noble has not been very competitive in these games, losing by an average of 32 points. But Ardmore hasn't been any better. 0-3 against a tough schedule with losses to Lawton Eisenhower, Ada, and Shawnee by an average score of 43-7. These teams are going to be playing hard because they know how big the W is in this case. We're going to see some points. The last 5 meetings these teams have combined for an average of 77 points. Last year, Noble won 60-56. The year before, Noble won 36-35. This may be the toughest pick of the week, and I'm going to roll with the Noble Bears on this one.
Mark Rogers.
I don't think we're going to see 116 points in this game. Matter of fact, I'm going to take the under on that. Tom, I'll do that for dinner. Ardmore also has faced a really tough schedule. I think Lawton Eisenhower is a lot better this year. Ada could be a 4A championship contender. They're undefeated. And then the other Ardmore loss was to Shawnee, who's much improved. This is a really tough game to pick. I agree. I think it could go either way. I'm going to go with Ardmore. My good friend Amanda Gentry was president of the Science Club in Ardmore, so I figured that she'll come up with some kind of concoction that Ardmore gets the victory over Noble in a much lower scoring game.
Well, our one of our experts is going to have at least one more loss than the other next week. Is Tom and Mark picking different teams in this game. Adam Diesel, to go to you. Noble at Ardmore.
We had to throw in some different games, and so it wasn't so easy for you guys. So that's why we kind of mixed it up this week with some of these kind of battles. I agree with what Mark and Tom have mentioned. I'm going to echo. Both these teams have struggled this year in comparison to what they had in years past, but they both have had tough schedules. I don't really know enough about Ardmore. I've seen Noble play a couple times on our network, and since they are a network school, I'm obviously going to give them the edge here, and I'm going to go with Noble. And by the way, if you're a fan of high school sports and you like production quality, check out noblebears.tv. Those guys do a phenomenal job covering their games. It's like ESPN style.
They do a really great job. Bryce Lamer, let's go to you. Noble at Ardmore.
Yeah, I'm in a field where if you're not an expert, you need to consult the specialist. So you guys are the experts. I'm going to go with Adam and Tom and go with the Noble Bears.
Well, Mark's an expert too, and he went with Ardmore. So.
Yeah.
Jacob DeSource.
Yeah, so when I was setting the line on this game, it literally came out as a pick'em game. So everybody's right that this is definitely a toss-up game. Of course, Ardmore is hosting the game. On paper, Noble has a small advantage, but again, we're looking at 2 teams that have lost all 3 of their games. Noble's conceded a lot of points in all 3 of their games. It's surprising to see Ardmore, no offense to Shawnee, but Ardmore doesn't lose to Shawnee very often. I know Shawnee's better this year, but, I think being at home is going to be the difference in this game. And I think it's going to be a really tight game. Again, I got it a pick 'em, but I got Ardmore winning 28-27 on a missed extra point.
Welcome to the square side. We'll take the Sharps down this week.
We'll go to Class A District 5 for our next pick'em game. The Tonkawa Bucks 3-0 on the season, and we'll host the Shoto Wildcats, who are 1-2 on the year after a tough loss to Warner last week. Tom Nelson, tell us about this Class A game.
Well, it's the A5 opener between Tonkawa, who the coaches picked in a tie for 3rd in this district, and Shoto, who the coaches picked the tie for last before the season. Shoto is 1-2, but they're coming off the high of a really nice win last week on the road at Warner, 130-22. Tonkawa's 3-0 against 3 teams that have gone a combined 1-8. I saw them 2 weeks ago when they beat Perry 8-0 in a game that Perry missed a bunch of chances to score. Tonkawa won this matchup a year ago. Final score is 54-19. I think the Bucks are going to find the offense. They're going to put up 40 this week and roll.
Mark Rogers.
Well, I don't really like Tom slandering the schedule of Tonkawa. Blackwell's the best 0-3 team in K County. And I dropped all my Tonkawa knowledge last week with Lane Jones on the show about Lunch and Munch and riding my bike down there. And they had Primetime Pizza, which is a pretty good place. I don't know if it's as good as Pizza Corral, but it worked when I was 16 or 17. This is I'm curious to see what the point spread is going to be on this, but I would take Tonkawa and lay the points against Shoto. This is the toughest district in the state. I think there's an incredibly good group of teams in here. So it'll be, I'm sure if we pick some Tonkawa games with Hominy and Morrison and those teams coming up later on and Woodland, that there are going to be some tough picks, but I don't think it's this one tonight. Tonkawa was big.
Adam.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with what Tom and Mark have mentioned. We obviously, Tom and I did get to see Tonkawa earlier in the year. They do have some impressive athletes on their team. They seem to just kind of struggle on the offensive side of the ball. It seems as if though things should come a little easier for them maybe down the road. I think that some of those key players have been a little bit banged up and look to kind of get healthy over the next few weeks. Shoto, I don't know a lot about them. I do know that they have fantastic Mennonite food in that community. Almost maybe on the same parallel as Mennonite food in Fairview.
That pretzels? What are they? What kind of food?
So I went there one time to a deli there and had some Mennonite food there, and so I had the oh my gosh, what do you call it? It's the stuff that the Paul Bunyan bread type stuff. Andy, help me out. That Miss Glover makes from Valco. There's a German name for it. I just call it Paul Bunyan bread.
Pretzels.
No, it's like bread with beef and cheese on the inside of it. It's phenomenal.
A B-Rock.
Be great.
A B-Rock, yes.
B-Rock.
Yes.
It blows me away in Oklahoma. Not nearly enough people know what a B-Rock is. In Kansas, that is like, we get those for school lunch in Kansas, but nobody knows what a B-Rock is down here.
Yeah, you just hit it with a little bit of mustard, so it kind of gives it that salty flavor, Mark. It's top notch. But
I'm in.
But going back to the game, I'm obviously going to give the edge to Tonkawa. They're also a new network, Squirtle School, and John Linton and Mickey Zachary would be very upset with me if I didn't pick Tonkawa as well as Nathan Geiser.
Bryce Lamer.
Yeah, I think even going back to the years I was playing, Tonkawa was always traditionally a good program. So I was doing my research and saw that they beat Blackville last week, 40-6. So that's pretty impressive. Yeah, so I'm going to go Tonkawa Bucks with the win.
Man, 2 shots in a row against you, Mark.
That's all right. We haven't beaten Tonkawa since 1985. All the shots are deserved.
Jacob B. Sources, go to you.
We got the Walmart though. I mean, that's that victory happened in about 1977. So
I'm gonna brag a little bit here. We're gonna be driving up I-35 this weekend north to watch the Chiefs and the Bears at Arrowhead. My daughter Hannah is a huge Chiefs fan, a huge Pat Mahomes fan. It's a screensaver. But of course I'm a Bears fan, as ashamed as I am to admit that, especially with the disarray going on in Chicago right now. But Justin Fields, wine fest. But anyway, it's still gonna be fun. It's still gonna be fun to watch an NFL game, watch the Bears and the Chiefs, but on my way there, I will be passing close to Mark's old stomping grounds, and not too far away from Tonkawa, who will be hosting this game Friday night, have the home field advantage. I agree with what Tom said earlier. I think Tonkawa is going to get that offense going in this game. I've got them a 30-point favorite at home, and I have them winning the game 35-6.
The Bears are in disarray, but at least the Cubs are still in the playoffs as of 8:30 on Wednesday night.
Well, Andy, I don't know if you're looking. We're losing right now to 11-7 to the Pirates.
As of 8:30 on Wednesday night, so it may change momentarily.
Fantasy baseball playoffs, and Justin Steele's ERA has doubled on the entire season tonight. He's my pitcher, so the Cubs keep screwing me over. It doesn't matter.
Been a rough couple of weeks to be a Cubs fan.
So you're picking Shoto to backdoor cover.
That is a cover.
Yeah, I do have them backdoor covered. Yeah.
Oh. All right, we're through 4 games. Let's go to our 5th. The Fairview Yellow Jackets making their first appearance on the Pick'em Show in 2023. The defending Class A state champions have a 3-hour road trip to Hooker to take on the Bulldogs. Hooker was off last week after a 61-0 beatdown of the Watonga Eagles a couple of weeks ago. Mark Rogers, we can't talk about football without talking cookies in the press box, but give us your pick on this game.
Well, I'll never forget calling the Fairview Hooker game last year in Fairview, where I was treated to an assortment of delicacies from the the cookie world, Miss Antoine's cookie bars, which are now Mark Rogers bars, were probably the best dessert item I've ever had at a sporting event. So last year I was really impressed with Fairview in this game, and Adam and I thought that this is a team that could win the state championship when we saw them. And I think that Fairview has probably got some rebuilding to do a little bit this year, but they still have Jace Bernard at quarterback, and he's one of the more dynamic players in small school Oklahoma football. So I don't think Hooker's made up enough ground. Their only loss this year is to Sunray, Texas, and I think that they are top 5 Class A team in Texas, or it's Class 2A. Class A is 6-man there, but I think Fairview wins in spite of the long road trip. Maybe they can go to Al's Superburger on the way back, or stop at Love's and Beaver or something like that. But long road trip, but Fairview wins.
Tom Nelson.
I hate to say it, but Al's Superburger no longer exists. Sad
Can't
to
go
say.
there.
And I do have to say, anytime Hooker comes up on the show, I've got to say, back in my American Legion baseball days, I was 1 for 3 against the Horny Toads with an RBI and a run scored. And they tried to run the old the pickoff play on me, tried to get me to step off first base because they thought I never got on base, so I'd get caught. And I sniffed it out. So my great baseball moment from Legion baseball comes at Hooker against the Hornets.
Are you saying that your highlight of your Legion career was going 1 for 3?
Yeah, I wasn't a very good Legion player. I didn't get much.
We can make up things. I mean, it's so long, nobody's going to go back and bet that. So.
I 333 was the batting average against Hooker. There you go.
We get to hear all these diesel horse stories all the time about how great they were at athletics. I'm not even sure they even played.
Well, I barely played. The highlight of my baseball career in Guyman, they put me in right field, and I took a dip of skull and threw up in right field. That happened too. So, but Fairview, I did it.
You overcame that addictions to tobacco.
I did.
Amazing, Tom.
You never know what you're going to get on this show, right? So I dove deep on this one to get this pick, and let's look at Hooker first. And Mark actually kind of stole my steam on this one. 2-1 on the season. They're only lost 49-23 at Sunray, Texas, who this week is ranked number 7 in Texas Class 2A Division II. They beat a winless Wheeler, Texas team by 20, then blasted with Tonga 61-0. Cleet Martins is the heart and soul of the team. He's a quarterback. He's completed 65% of his passes for over 500 yards. He's rushing for just over 100 yards a game. He's by far their most dangerous offensive weapon. Fairview outscored Alva 15-0 in the fourth quarter last week to win by 20. That game was close until the fourth quarter. They let the Goldbugs hang around before they put the foot on the gas late. We've talked about Fairview on the show quite a bit. They're good. They're intent on defending their state title. These two teams have played each year since 2010. Fairview's won 9 of the 13 games in the series, and it was Fairview 55-12 last year. It's a long drive to the Panhandle for the Jackets. I think they're going to use the time to get focused and come back with a victory.
Adam D. Source.
Yeah, before I get started, I just also have to second what Mark mentioned about the Mark Rogers cookies, and they can be named that because they're phenomenal. I actually got brought some of those by Miss Antoine at the Squirtle school that we had a couple weeks ago at Enid, and so she brought those to me. And actually, I was made fun of by Mark because I did not eat the entire container within 2 days, and legitimately there were 40 of them in there. So,
what disrespect!
And he didn't offer me one of them. He didn't offer me one of them that day.
You want to talk about beating an addiction? I'll tell you this right now: my brain would not let me focus on anything else with those cookie bars in my house. I'd have eaten them all, probably in the first 6 minutes.
I just left one in there for 4 days just so I knew I'd still have one, but. Anyway, to the game, as you guys have mentioned before, this game has kind of been a game in this district that's been circled every year. It's kind of been, the team that typically has won this game over the last 5 years has been the district champion from this, or at least has competed to win the district. And the last couple of years, it's been one we circled and thought that it was going to be a very competitive game. And really, it hasn't been competitive. And that, I don't think, is anything against Hooker. That just shows you how good Fairview has gotten over the last few years. I do think this game will be different. I think that kind of what Hooker has gone through over the last couple of years, we've seen Fairview kind of going through that at the moment. Fairview is not a void of skill position players and players that have played key roles over the last couple of years and on their state title run. They have as good of wide receivers and skill position players as there is in the class. And they also have very good linemen. They're just young kids up front on both sides of the ball that didn't have to play as key roles as they did in the past. So I do think that's something to kind of consider. I do think that keeps the game closer. Hooker has a great quarterback. Hooker has a great offense. They have a great coaching staff. I just think ultimately Fairview just has too much firepower, and I just think they've won so many big games over the last couple of years that I give them a nod in this game, and they're also a squirrel school, so obviously I'm going with them.
Bryce Langer.
You guys were talking about places to eat in Northwest Oklahoma. I remember driving up to Laverne, Oklahoma, back in high school, and we talked our coach into stopping at McDonald's before the game, which was not a very wise decision. So hopefully they don't make that mistake on this 3-hour road trip. But ultimately, I think Fairview, number one in the state, they're just too powerful, and go on the road and get the W.
So, Bryce, what is your go-to at McDonald's? You can go there.
Yeah, I'm not a healthy eater, unfortunately. So
Big
usually something
McMuffin.
off the dollar menu.
Did anybody ever go to the Tiger's Den in Laverne?
I've never been.
And
No, but I will tell you what, if you ever get a chance to go to Laverne to broadcast a game, do it, because they just feed you like nobody's business in the press box before and after the game. It was awesome.
They got nothing on Miss Antoine's cookies.
Jacob Desource.
So, the more I looked at this game, the more it seems like a little bit of a trap game for Fairview. They've had their way with Hooker the last few years. That didn't sound good at all, did it? But they've dominated the series lately, and that's despite the fact that Hooker has had a top-notch team every single season. Hooker having played those Texas teams, they're going to have a little bit of edge. It's a long road trip. Fairview has won how many X number of games in a row? They're on this long winning streak right now. I think they're due for a letdown at some point. I think this is a really challenging spot for Fairview. I have Fairview an 8-point favorite on the road, and I can't pick against my alma mater, even though I do think this is going to be a tough game. I don't feel quite as bad about it as I did OSU and South Alabama when I saw that line. OSU only a 7-point favorite. I had a really bad feeling about that game going into it, but not as bad of a feeling as I did when I left in the third quarter. But with that being said, I got Fairview winning this game 41-31.
All right, guys, let's go to game number 6. How about this matchup in 4A2? The Hera Panthers are undefeated, but have a tough test this week as they go on the road to face Jeff Craig's Blanchard Lions team. Blanchard 2-1 on the season with their only loss to 5A Piedmont. Tom Nelson, kick us off.
Well, Hera's 3-0 for the first time in 12 years after they blasted Seminole. Final score was 45-6 last week. I hope I'm not butchering this kid's name. Senior Devin McCarrig, 230 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns that ball game. Landon Yowsey stood up defensively. They beat the Chieftains for the first time in 8 years. The schedule hasn't been great, but they have won the 3 games by an average of 38 points. But this week they go to Blanchard for their biggest test of the season. Blanchard has won the last 6 games in the series since 2016. None of those games have been close. The Lions had to come from behind and get a big interception late to beat Shawnee last week, 34-31. Hera got through the non-district without a scratch, but I see them getting dinged this week. Blanchard's going to go 1-0 in 4A2.
Mark Rogers.
Maybe a little look-ahead game for Blanchard here. I don't know if Jake is going to have this factor into the line on this game because they play Newcastle the next week. Blanchard is one of the top contenders in Class 4A, along with Tuttle, Poto, and Wagner. Maybe there's a couple other teams that can kind of get involved in there. You never count out Clinton. Newcastle is really good this year. Ada, like I said, I think has their best team that they've had in a long time. But this is a Blanchard team that is, to me, has got a lot of talent. I think they win this game pretty easily. And Hera competes to try to get into the playoffs in the district in 4A2 this year. Games against Bethany, I think will decide maybe who gets in there because I think Blanchard, Newcastle, and Tuttle are all going to be in the playoffs. So for Hera, it'd be a huge win if they can get it. But I think that maybe just trying to get into the playoffs after several down years in Hera would be a great accomplishment for this team. But I don't think they beat the Lions.
Adam Desource.
Man, Coach Craig at Blanchard, he is not afraid to schedule some people. They have, if you look at their schedule, Mark just mentioned it. We've seen who they've played already so far up to this point in the season. And Shawnee is a much improved team too. And they've got Hera this week who's undefeated. Next week they play Newcastle. Week after that, I believe they have Tuttle. So obviously they are on a murderer's row, as you would consider it right now. But it seems, Blanchard's the team with quite a bit of the experience. Hera, major props to them. They're a team that we've seen over the last few years. They're a Squirtle Network school. I'm going to name drop those all the time when I can, but have improved throughout the last handful of years, getting much better. I see this game being a competitive game. I just think that, it's a competitive game in the first half. I think ultimately Blanchard's just too much. They have too much firepower, and I think they end up winning the game by a couple touchdowns. So I'll go with Blanchard and Jeff Craig.
Bryce Lamer.
Yeah, I told you I work in Yukon, but also have a practice in Shawnee, which is close up to Hera, and I see a lot of patients. Actually, a couple of our staff members are from that area, and I've heard about a lot of excitement around the program. And you can't win if you keep going with the experts. So I'm going to go Hera in this matchup on the road.
I like it.
Taking the Hera Panthers. Jacob Easorst, to go to you.
Yeah, that would be a huge win for Hera. I mean, if they could go into Blanchard, top 5, 4A top 5 team. I actually have number 3 in my rankings, and win. That's a tall task. And I do think Hera is much improved, and I agree with Mark. I think they're going to be right there fighting for a playoff spot. But Blanchard is elite. They're the upper echelon of Class 4A, and having this game at home is good. Going to be a big advantage for them as well. I have them a 10.5-point favorite at home, and I have Blanchard winning a tight game, 35-27.
All right, guys, 2 games left. Our Squirtle games of the week. Let's go to 8-man football in Class B for our first Squirtle game of the week. And this is Todd Miller, Adam Dieselhorst on the call on Friday in Garber. The Covington Douglas Wildcats 4-0 and have looked really impressive so far in 2023. The Wildcats will take the 9-mile drive to north to Garber to take on the Wolverines. Garber 2-1 on the season, but suffered a tough loss last week at Drumright. Tom Nelson, first of all, did I get the 9 miles right? And secondly, can Garber bounce back this week against Covington Douglas?
You nailed it. 9 miles apart in eastern Garfield County. This is the War on Highway 74. There's a couple of those called the War on Highway 74. This is one of them. And this has been a pretty competitive rivalry since 2000. Garber leads the series 12-9, but Covington Douglas has won 4 of the last 5, including 52-8 last year. What happened to Garber last week? Gave up 80 points in a loss to Drumright, Brett Howery, the quarterback for the Wolverines, we're hearing that he's hurt and won't play, which is not going to change my pick any. But, Mark Bishop trying to pick up the slack, has over 400 rushing and receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. This might be Covington Douglas's year. They're 4-0. I saw them beat Timberlake 22-6 in their opener in a game that probably wasn't that close. They've scored 60-plus points a couple of times since then. They've got a home game against Sealing coming up at the end of October that's going to be very interesting. The coach's son, quarterback Ford Smith, leads them in rushing almost 500 yards and has been pretty efficient throwing it as well. But he's not their only weapon. They've got enough weapons to handle the Wolverines, and I think they'll get it done.
Mark Rogers.
Well, this is the anniversary of the worst pick I've ever made in the history of my picks. Bryce, earmuffs, please. Sorry. Pick Garber to win last year. They got beat 52-8. So there's no way I'm picking the Wolverines to win. I'm going with Covington Douglas to win the game, and hopefully we'll get some redemption from a year ago, because I do, I usually pride myself on being okay at these high school picks. Spent a lot of time doing some research, and still very embarrassed over that. Nothing against Garber. Adam and I watched some of their game last week against Drumright, who, by the way, I think is really good in Class B and is kind of a borderline contender there.
All right, Adam.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough one for me, because these are 2 schools, obviously, that I'm extremely familiar with. We typically cover a lot of their games, programs that have a lot of success in all sports. But as far as it goes for this football game on Friday night, on Garber's side, we obviously know they're dealing with some injuries. That happens, and they're much more magnified in 8-man than anywhere else. You just don't have the sheer number of players and the athletes. And so when you lose a key player, it makes it super difficult. Adjustments are a lot harder to make in 8-man than in 11-man, obviously. And I think also on top of that, Covington is just over the last couple of years just really kind of taken steps to improve incrementally every year. I think this is a situation where a lot of people may believe that Covington is going to win this game handily. I don't believe that. I do believe Covington will win the game, but I think that Garber is going to show a ton of fight. I put a lot of trust in their coaching staff to know they're going to have those kids prepared. I think it's going to be a really close game, but I think ultimately the injuries and just having to deal with that is going to be too much. And Mark, you're right. Major props to Drumright. They're actually a recent Squirtle school as well. Chris Elric is doing a fantastic job there. I know the score of 80 points is super surprising, but they have a very talented team. They have some big skill guys, big line up front, and Chris has really instilled that winner's mentality with them, and I think they're going to be a force to reckon with.
All right, let's go to the Wolverine. Bryce Lamer.
Yeah, the war on 74. I have family in Cashin, and they try to tell me that the Crescent Cashin rivalry is the real war on 74, but we'll take it for this week. I have ties on both sides. Obviously, Garber being my alma mater, but I have my sister lives in Covington. I have 2 nephews that'll be future Covington Wildcats when they get in high school. So, I'm torn. I think, if you look at the history, I think Garber's kind of dominated the history. But as of late, I think you guys all kind of hit it on. I think Covington is kind of maybe been on top. I called my old coach, Coach Harmon, to get some insight. He kind of has ties to both sides, and one of his best friends is Coach Smith up at Covington. I know they have a pretty good squad this year with his son being a quarterback, and I think they're probably honestly the better team, especially with Garber possibly being without their quarterback. Howery probably done for the season is what I'm hearing. But I think ultimately I can't go against my alma mater. I think they rely on their defense, their big offensive line, Cooper Hughes and Jackson Weibling, and get the win home.
Bryce taking Garber. Jacob Easorst to you. Oh, sorry, Tom. Go ahead.
I got to interject something real quick. Now, Bryce, I got 2 things here. First of all, I think that this is the real war on 74 because Cashin actually sits on like 74 C.
74 J.
Yeah, whatever. It's like a different 74. It's like a spur or something like that. This is real ribbon of highway, 9 miles, straight as an arrow. You can see the lights from each school, from each town when you're looking from the other way. And then I've got the food pick in Garber. Do you go with that log cabin cafe or the 2 convenience stores?
I think you just go. I mean, I think you just go to historic food. I gotta go to eat it. There's not much as far as places to eat in Garber, but I don't have too much advice in that regard.
Well, I think the Dairy Mart's opening back up in Covington, so you may have to just drive 9 miles down the road. But before Jake makes his pick, I also want to give big props to both schools, Covington and Garber. They do a fantastic job in our network, and Sean Weibling is actually going to be helping us out. We're kind of short some men on crews, so some of Garber Wolverines' crew is actually Garber Wolverines.tv's crew is going to help us on that game.
Jacob Easorst, let's go to you.
I've abandoned trying to be reasonable about how to set lines on 8-man football games. You talk about 8-man teams making adjustments. Why don't they make an adjustment and both add 3 players to their teams and play 11-man football? I'm joking. Look, this 8-man football is like it's something that it's tradition, right? There's something about Oklahoma 8-man football, and these schools are 2 examples. Northwest Oklahoma 8-man football is where it's at. So much tradition. And I've all season wanted to do this, and learning now that Garber's quarterback is out. I didn't know that before the game. So that changes the line. I actually had the line off because of that, because we're not sure about his status. So there's no line on this game yet. But I have the final score 100 to 90 to 90. And I have Covington Douglas winning the game. It's just gonna be back and forth, up and down the field, just nonstop action. They're gonna play an extra quarter just for the heck of it, just so we can get to 100 points in a game. So yeah, I got a high scoring shootout, but I think Cov Doug is gonna win this game.
I do need to throw something else in here too, because we all kind of picked against Garber tonight. But I will say this:
Not all of us.
Okay, that's true. There's no doubt that Warrendale Stadium is one of the great places to watch an 8-man football game. It's one of my favorite places to broadcast from. You've got great lighting, nice press box, no track. You're sitting right on the field, and a great atmosphere because that place is packed every Friday night. So they might struggle this year, but Warrendale Stadium is still tops when it comes to watching 8-man football.
Well, To touch on that, Tom, I stopped in town the other day to stop by and see Coach Torrey. He's back there as superintendent, and Coach Torrey actually coached Bryce in basketball. And Warren was out with the reel mower, reel mowing the field. I mean, their turf is like Mark and I mentioned how nice Cassidy's turf was last week when we were down on the field, and Garber's rivals that. And you were talking about their facilities. They just passed another bond there at Garber, and they're going to be building a new indoor facility for football, and also will be utilizing that for baseball. So as it pertains to 8-man or Class B or any sport, they've got as good of facilities as anybody.
All right, guys, let's go to our
Not
final
to mention
game.
sweet jerseys too.
They do. They have the
You
helmets.
gotta, Garber's got. Yeah, you gotta look at this.
Great jerseys, great helmets at Garber. Our other Squirtle Network game of the week takes us to District 3A2 as the Marlow Outlaws will host Pauls Valley Panthers. Both teams undefeated, with the Outlaws getting a win at Perkins in overtime, 27-21. Good win there for Marlow. Mark, you're on the call for this matchup. Tell us what to watch for.
Well, I love going to Marlow Stadium. I did see my brother get eliminated at Marlow in the first round of the playoffs. That stadium was built in 1936 by the WPA. There's several stadiums around Oklahoma that are like that. This is a great game. Pauls Valley has a lot of tradition. This is the best team that they've had in quite a few years. They've got some good underclassmen on this team. Marlow's quarterback, Gilbert, is a really good player, and they had a nice win at Perkins last week. I think if we would have picked that game, I would have picked the Demons to beat the Outlaws, and Marlow came back. We're down a touchdown and then won the game by a touchdown. So I'm going to go with the home team here. I think Marlow wins. Everybody's playing for second in this district. I think everybody knows it behind Heritage Hall, who's just loaded. But who gets second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth in this district is going to be quite a race. You've got Sulphur, you've got Lone Grove. I think Dixon is undefeated. I don't think they're quite in the class of Pauls Valley or Marlow, but those are four teams in there. Plainview. So that's five teams that I think are all kind of competing for 3 playoff spots behind Heritage Hall. This one will go a long way in, who might be able to host one of those, host a playoff game. So I got Marlow in a close one.
Tom Nelson, you're making all 8 picks, and now you don't have to call a game. So give us your pick for this 8th game in the Squirtle Pick'em.
Here's a great stat that I found. Marlow and Pauls Valley have been playing off and on since 1926. Pauls Valley won the first matchup back in 26, 30-0. The series is tied 15-15 with one tie back in 1931. Now, more recently, Marlow has won the last 3, including 29-14 last year. Pauls Valley hasn't started 3-0 since 2001. They've got some quality wins. They've beaten Lindsay, Davis, and Purcell. Tanner Perry has been an efficient quarterback, completing 70% of his passes, averaging almost 70 rushing yards a game. Rain Major averages almost 9 yards a carry. Maddox Prince has been a nice target for Perry in the passing game. Marlow got a really big win last week at Perkins Tryon, handed the top 5 ranked Demons their first loss. This week, Marlow is in the top 5, and they might have the target on their back. Okay, I think this is the toughest pick of the weekend. I'm going to say that Marlow has a letdown after their big win, and Pauls Valley is going to continue their best start in over 20 years. I might either lose one or make one up to Mark on this one. Give me the Panthers. They'll take the series lead 16-15-1, but this is going to be a close game. It's going to be a good one for you guys to call.
Tom taking the visiting Panthers. Adam Dieselhorse, let's go to you.
Yeah, before I get started, we mentioned Perkins. We're excited about next week. We'll be covering Metro Christian at Perkins. And then I believe Mark and I will be traveling to Dewar to do Velma Alma Dewar, which should be a great game in 8-man. So there's some games to anticipate in the network. But, as you guys have mentioned, really excited about getting down to Marlow. I appreciate Mark for helping hook that up with us. David Bryant's been fantastic. He's let me know, they don't do a lot of streaming and have people come in to cover things. So they're really excited about us coming. A lot of history there, a lot of tradition. Marlow's been a program that has really been great over the last 5 years, won a state championship a few years back. Pauls Valley is kind of on the up and up. Honestly, it would be horrible for me in the Lamer household to pick against both Garber and Marlow. And Autumn would be so disappointed with me. And so I love Autumn to death. Wish she was still working for me. And so I'm going to go with Marlow. Autumn Davenport is the Marlow grad. I'm going to stick with Autumn's team and go with Marlow.
Bryce?
As Adam said, Autumn is my wife. Obviously, she's from graduated Marlow. And then we have family there. I have a couple nephews that are going to be Marlow Outlaws. one of these days. So if I don't want to sleep on the couch, I have to go, obviously, with Marlowe. But I think they're the better team. They're number 4 in the state. They're not real big, but they got a great quarterback, Cade Gilbert, good wide receiver, Baron Gage. I think they ultimately get it done at home and get the win.
Jacob Esource.
Yeah, this is a great matchup, top 10 matchup. Again, I think home field advantage is going to play a big part in this. And Pauls Valley, they need to make sure they get on the road at the right time. You don't want to get on I-35 at like 5 o'clock in Pauls Valley, late to the game, or take the back roads. You end up taking the back roads, and then you take a wrong turn somewhere, and just you're on a dirt road, and next thing you know. But game, great matchup. Pauls Valley is a good team. Pauls Valley is going to push in the playoffs. They're going to make a run in the playoffs. But I think going to Marlowe is just going to be a little bit too much. I got Marlowe an 8-point favorite, and I got Marlowe winning a tight game, the game of the week, a close one, 35-34.
I'm just glad Tom can make 8 picks. I mean, I know it's arduous to get to that extra pick and everything, so I'm glad that he made it through it. And
it's like going to overtime,
Do we have any food picks for Marlowe? I think Mark mentioned pizza, but then Hardaway did actually. I believe Autumn actually wrote the Italian food place. Is it Giuseppe's?
Yeah, Giuseppe's would be her recommendation.
Yeah, is Giuseppe's in Marlowe, because they have a pizza place that's right downtown. That's not Giuseppe's.
There is a pizza place, but Giuseppe's is like more Italian, right across the street. I don't know the name of the pizza place, but they're both great.
From Norman, you do have to drive past Ken's Steakhouse in Amber to get to Marlowe, which is a very nice choice. Jake's Rib is also a pretty good choice. But as Tom pointed out, the only Taco Tico in Oklahoma, I think, is in Duncan, and that's just about 12 miles south. You do have to drive all the way through Duncan to get there. But the double enchiladas and the double enchiladas, that's the order. 2 of them might be the pregame meal.
Smothered Sancho, and I will load up on the Taco Burger Deluxe.
The Taco Tico is the original home of the taco burger. I have no idea how such greatness can be taken away from us only in Duncan.
My entire family lives in Kansas, both sides, and I'd say that may be the only reason to go to Kansas. No, I shouldn't say that, but Taco Tico is impressive. So.
Well, hey guys, we have a couple of minutes. There's a couple of good games in 6A1 this week. Mark and Adam, if you guys want to make any comments on this, Owasso at Union, Norman North at Bixby, and then in 6A2 we have Sand Springs visiting Muskogee. Top 3 matchup there. Mark, any thoughts on those matchups or anything else in the state going on this week?
I had Justin Jones on the show today. I asked him what's the difference in Bixby last year and this year. And he said really not much, but they did lose a ton of talent. I think Norman North's pretty good. And so I really was kind of hoping to get Justin gave me all coach speak today. So I really don't have any indication of can they hang, but I think Norman North is pretty good. They beat Jinx last year. They got crushed in this game a year ago. I think they're a little closer, but I think Bixby's going to win. I don't know what's going on with Union. At the TU game, I was talking with the guy up there that was like, "Hey, is it time for a new coach at Union?" Which I was like, "What? No, I don't think so." But Coach Fred's done such a good job there. But them losing to Jinx was kind of a surprise to me. Them losing to Owasso last year in the semifinals was also a surprise to me. I think Union has as much talent as anybody in the state, so I think they get some revenge on that game that they lost in the playoffs last year. And I do think Bixby and Union are still the top 2 teams in 6A Division I. We got Sand Springs and Muskogee.
Yes.
I like Jamarian Ficklin. I like Muskogee in that game. Sand Springs is coming off a loss to Bixby a couple weeks ago. Their defense, I don't think, is quite as good as what it's been. But 6A Division I is really interesting this year. And I think it will be – this is a big test for the West Side. If Norman North can play close with Bixby, then I think that the West Side can feel a lot better about itself.
So, Andy, we're going to do a whole show and not talk about K-State and OSU losing because we always talk about OU losing games. So, is that what we're going to do?
Hey, I'm happy. I'm happy to bring it up. Tom had a rough day with a 61-yard field goal at the buzzer.
That kicker was huge
at Mizzou, and
kicker
had a rough day in Stillwater. So.
I mean, we lost a really stud linebacker for the year. Our quarterback might be out, might be starting a freshman quarterback on Saturday against UCF, and it might be a interesting Saturday. People like this new quarterback. He was one of the top dual threat quarterbacks in the country when he signed with K-State, and they may throw him into the mix as a freshman, as a true freshman on Saturday.
Well, at OSU, he could be the fourth quarterback or the. I mean, why not play five? Why not play five quarterbacks? I mean, at this point,
shares at OSU.
That was. I will say this: I was ashamed. I was a little bit ashamed of some of the OSU fans this week. I mean, booing Bowman, like when he gets subbed out. It's just not. I don't think. I don't like it when fans boo college kids. I mean, I don't at any level. Like when OU was booing, Rattler a few years ago. I mean, it's classless, guys. I mean, come on. Teams are entitled to have down years every now and then, but fans, we're still fans. We're not calling the shots on the program. So I think OSU's gonna have a rough year this year, but I don't want to hear any more booing and Boone Pickens.
The amount of hostility for a 2-1 team is just off the charts.
Yeah.
You got to see some of the messages that I get at the station. I mean, from people, they're ready to riot in Stillwater, and I mean they don't look very good. So I don't know how many more games they're going to win, but at least they're above 500 right now.
It was not pretty.
A lot more lessons from you to the OSU fans, because it is going to get ugly.
Go ahead.
Ugly. The club. It was just ugly in the Northside club level. I will say that in the second half last weekend. I mean, there was, I think they stopped serving early. It was getting pretty bad up there. But there were some angry people. But yeah, it was ugly. I don't know, man. Gundy better have something up his sleeve. But I don't think he does. But
the line for that game Saturday with OSU and Iowa State and the over/under are both pretty fascinating to me. So
35 is the total.
Yeah.
Wow, 35.
Yep.
Wow.
35.
So, Mark, question for you: whose physical stature is more impressive, the quarterback from Canadian Oklahoma,
Yes,
or the kicker from Missouri that nailed the 62-yarder?
Well, the quarterback from Canadian, he looked like Billy Kilmer for the old Washington Redskins. His jersey didn't quite fit, and he kind of just ruled the game like a boss. And Canadian has not won many games. I think they had a weather delay the week before against Savannah, but they ended a long losing streak, and they beat
Woke
36-6 last week. But he was very impressive. Not very often do you see a guy that is a defensive tackle and a quarterback, and he did a great job in a very scenic setting there at Canadian, right on Lake Eufaula. A lot of trees in the background, and an old school press box, which Adam talked about, was very similar to the one at Haleyville, where they raffled off the press box as a deer stand the last weekend in October. So that can double as you can shoot a deer up there, you can call a play, or you might be able to scout the opposition.
Hey, I've got to throw in here really quick. We don't talk about Enid High School nearly enough, but I've got to throw in South Alabama tight end Lincoln Sefcik from Enid High.
Yep.
And a former Plainsman played a role in that nice win for South Alabama last week in Stillwater. So,
hey, the Sun Belt Conference has some really good teams in it. I mean, there's a lot of good football teams in that conference. So, I mean, that doesn't excuse what happened in Stillwater last weekend, but you look at what Coach Prime's doing in Colorado, the talent he took with him, and then you look at some of the teams, Appalachian State, James Madison, South Alabama. I mean, there's a lot of good football teams that can cause problems for Power 5 teams. So that's done no excuse, but they literally pushed OSU around. I mean, they did. They pushed them around.
Tom, I think I saw Enid is hosting Jinx this week. So
I may not doing a game. I may sneak over there because I haven't seen Enid's new video board, but I might sneak in there tomorrow, Friday night, because I tell you what I'm doing. I was going to mention this too, because the reason I'm not doing a game on Friday night, I am the MC for the local Enid Alzheimer's Walk, which is a great cause to be a part of. So I'll be doing the emceeing for that and doing the walk downtown Enid on Friday night. I've done that for them the last 3 years. So that's why I'm not calling a ball game. I think that's a pretty darn good cause. And I've got some family members that are dealing with that too. So that's where I'll be on Friday night. And come on out. And if you're in Enid and not going to the Enid High game, we may take the walk early around 6 o'clock and then go down and see how the game comes out at 7 o'clock at D. Bruce Selby Stadium. So
even though Tom's not calling a game, he is ubiquitous around the state. Everywhere we go, he is on his Game Time Live is just continuing to. I do have a problem though. I've got some requests because at a couple of places we've been, they're playing some horrible music. I mean, there needs to be some better music.
Jacob can figure that out. I think Jake is our resident music guy. So,
hey, and Andy, before we leave, let's let Bryce tell people where they can visit him if they have any dental needs.
I meant to do that earlier. Bryce, go ahead.
Absolutely, yeah. So I'm an oral and maxillofacial surgeon. So do pretty much anything from the head and neck up. Anything from facial trauma, corrective jaw surgery, pathology, but mostly dental implants and wisdom teeth. So I'm with a group called OKC OMS, and we have multiple locations around the Oklahoma City metro area, one on north, up by Lake Hefner, one in South OKC, one in Yukon, and one in Shawnee. So I'm at the Yukon and Shawnee location, but you can get on our website and come check us out if you need any of those type of procedures done.
Bryce, do you put diamonds in teeth? Can I get 2 diamonds in my front 2 teeth?
Yeah, I've had that request for sure. Unfortunately, I don't do that, but
Okay.
I'm sure I can point you in the right direction if you're interested.
Yeah,
If
it's
your
gonna have to be
di-
out of
if your-
pocket. I don't think my
If your
insurance
diamond
covers it.
teeth get knocked out, he can fix them.
Yes,
Good.
exactly.
Okay. Well, I hope that's not going to happen.
Bryce, I'm getting old and my memory's slipping, but remind me, I think you were on that Garber team, played your first round state game at Norman High, correct? Back in 09, 010.
Yeah, so I was there in 09 and 10, and we had our first state game at Mustang High School, I believe, and the next year was in Stillwater.
I was thinking one year you guys played at Norman, one of the worst broadcast experiences I've ever had. They've never had state basketball at Norman since then, which they learned a big lesson that night.
Oh yeah, so yeah, you're talking about basketball. I'm sorry, I thought we were talking about
basketball.
Yes, basketball, 100%. Yeah,
Oh,
that was down in before we could play at the big house. I think the first rounds were at some regional sites, and that was one of them.
I mean, it was Class B? It was Class B basketball. Class A. Was it Class A or Class B?
Class A basketball.
Still, small schools and the Norman High School gym, they had to move the fans in and out between games because they couldn't accommodate Class A fan bases. And luckily, and we were at the score table with 15,000 other radio stations. It was a horrible night. Garber wins, but that was the good thing about it. But it was horrible getting out.
Yeah. That was great. Thank you guys for having me. I mean, you guys are the face of Oklahoma high school sports, and you do so much. You know, growing up, Tom listening to you on the radio after games, or Mark seeing you on the radio or on TV, and all you guys have done to put a spotlight on these kids is just incredible, because sports are such an impactful part of development in these kids' lives. So memories will take forever, and I sure have some great ones.
Bryce, a lot of great games, the Wolverines. Yep, called a lot of great games, the Wolverines over the years.
Bryce, I think you just made a Squirtle commercial. Where that's going to go on a network commercial here coming up pretty soon. I think Corey Rogers is getting on that right now, our producer. Bryce, thanks for being with us. Also, thanks to Adam for filling in last second. Did a great job. Really appreciate you guys joining us, and appreciate all the fans watching on Squirtle.tv. This Squirtle Pater Pick'em show sponsored by Maples, Dix, and Dieselhorst. All 8 games we discussed tonight are available for free to watch on Squirtle.tv. Again, Mark and Todd also calling the Squirtle games of the week that we talked about earlier. We'll be back next week with new guests and 8 more great games. We'll see you then.